The Paranormal Chronicles Network presents the Event Horizon Show with your host, Dave Dominguez.
Hello everyone and welcome to our first episode of Event Horizon on the Paranormal Chronicles Radio Network. I'm Dave Dominguez and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. This will be our first show. Today we have a first guest is Claire Elliot of the Claire Witch Files. Is that correct? Claire Witch Files?
That's right, yeah.
The Claire Witch Files. And Claire is a member of the British Psychological Society. She's a graduate of the British Psychological Society. Also a member of the Society for
Psychical
Research. I'm sorry about that. And she's also founder of MMU Parapsychology Society.
That's right.
Did I get that right, Claire?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, thank you. Good. I was hoping I tried not to butcher it. You delve in a lot of different things, and what you have also is you kind of go in with an open mind, with a skeptical point of view.
That's right.
On your investigations.
Yeah. I am a skeptic, but I still go ghost hunting. But I do try and occupy the middle ground. So whilst I am a skeptic and I don't think that the paranormal exists, I'm open to the possibility that it could do, and I still go researching and I talk to people about their paranormal experiences with an open mind. So I take the standpoint that whilst I think the paranormal doesn't exist, I don't know that it exists.
You found proof,
I haven't
though.
seen anything.
I haven't seen
anything that I think that it convinces me, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist. It's out there, and I just haven't had that experience yet.
I also read that you're into EVPs. Right?
That's right.
EVPs.
Yeah, that's what my research is looking at.
Right.
Yeah, electronic voice phenomena.
And that's your project. That's your research project right now that you.
It
have
is. Yeah, that's what I'm researching. So I'm not looking at the validity of EVP. So I'm not looking at whether it is a real paranormal phenomena. What I'm looking at is whether there are certain groups that are possibly more prone to hearing something in background noise than others. So that's what the psychology of EVP. It's probably best way of describing it.
Because what I've heard, because I've heard some EVPs, you see them on the reality ghost hunting shows, and they play them back, and you really don't understand what they're saying until they flash the words up on the screen, and then your brain automatically says, oh yeah, that's what they're saying, because you're reading it, so your brain's interpreting that.
I mean, some people have argued that because EVP is quite difficult to interpret, it actually makes it more believable because it's quite sort of ethereal. If it was clearer, we wouldn't necessarily think it was a ghost because it would almost be too perfect. But yes, certainly when you hear EVP recordings, it's unlikely that you'll get a message straight away. But once somebody tells you what that message is supposed to be, you can't hear anything else.
That's right.
So it can be quite convincing.
It's like you can't unsee a picture when somebody
Exactly, yeah.
A picture. Exactly. And what I find interesting, though, I don't know what your experiences are with those ghost boxes that they.
Oh yeah, I've got a spirit box actually.
Right. Okay, they scan all the frequencies. Now, wouldn't it be possible if you're doing an investigation, this thing is scanning all kinds of frequencies? You could pick up anything. It's not necessarily has to be a ghost. It could be anything.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's obviously the skeptical argument. If you're using a detuned radio or a radio that scans through all the frequencies, you're going to get snippets of music and conversation.
Right.
So through over a few channels, that could sound like a message. I mean, EVP messages tend to be quite brief anyway. So all you would have to get is 3 words in a row that were relevant. And some people would say it's an EVP, but that could be 3 words of 3 different broadcast signals. So that's where the skeptical argument comes in. I mean, EVP hasn't been replicated in controlled conditions. So if you put a spirit box in a Faraday pouch, which blocks stray signals and the radio frequencies, you won't get an EVP message because no radio frequencies are coming through.
Right.
So I would argue that means it's not paranormal.
So it could be something else.
But, yeah,
probably picking up something your neighbor's radio.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
whatever it could be.
It's microwave.
What I find interesting though, EVPs, is when they pick up something like on a digital recorder or even in the old cassette recorders.
Yeah.
That to me is a little bit more.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, the more recent term, EVP is used for a couple of different things. One is the detuned radio method, but historically EVP has been tape recorders. It's now digital recorders. But if you think back to tape recorders, very often tapes are reused and also used on long play as well. So you could have had pre-recorded messages that were already on there through speech that you're recording over, and that could be what you're hearing. Also, analog recorders had a lot of internal moving parts, which can obviously create their own internal noise. So, a skeptic could say what you're actually hearing is the mechanics of the recorder rather than a real message coming through. There are a few different rational explanations for EVP that I would probably more likely go for than the paranormal explanation.
And people they're always going to be a skeptic, and somebody's always going to come up and say,
yeah.
it's this, it's that, everything can be explained. And then you go to the digital recorders, like say your cell phone or a tablet or what have you, that has no moving parts.
Exactly.
And it doesn't pick up radio signals.
Well, it can do. Microphones can pick up stray radio signals, but there's also the auto gain circuit that you have in recorders as well can possibly affect it. And what that does, it amplifies low frequency noises and also reduces high frequency noises. So if you're in a room and you put a recorder down, nobody's making any noise, it actually is going to raise the noise floor up because there's not many loud sounds. So sometimes that can actually create something because it's raised the noise floor and made everything louder. So any kind of static or slight knock in the room it's going to sound louder than it would have done.
It'll stand out more.
Potentially, yeah. And also, I mean, if you're doing an investigation, it's quite difficult to remain completely still. There's lots of different noises that people just make unwittingly, and you might forget that you've shuffled your feet or moved around, or even someone could have muttered something, and in the sort of the heat of the moment, you forget that you've said that. So it's not necessarily anything, it's not like people are lying, but they might forget something has happened and maybe not recorded it at the time, noted it down, and then listening to it back, it can then possibly sound like an EVP when there's actually an actual explanation for it.
Right. Now, this is what started you. If I'm not mistaken, what I read was the EVP is what started you on your quest towards the paranormal.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's where my research is at. And my fascination with the paranormal started quite young. So my mum has seen a ghost. When I was younger, that ghost story, which is still the gold standard for me, was very influential. And I was always fascinated by the paranormal. I was open-minded. Up until I started studying psychology. Yes. And it was then I sort of looked at, possibly perception might have a lot to do with it. And it was then I realised that it's actually, psychology of paranormal perception is a research area within itself to investigate. So that's why I got interested in it. And by that time, I'd gone ghost hunting as well. So I started ghost hunting, originally with an open mind. And I was quite fascinated by, you'd have a group of ghost hunters on a commercial ghost hunt. And there'd be a knock or something in the room, and half the group would say it was paranormal, or they might hear something, and the other group were unconvinced and didn't see or hear anything. So I was quite interested about how those people were differing in the same event, if you know what I mean. So that got me thinking about maybe there are sort of group differences between people and how they respond to ambiguous sound.
Have you had the chance to interview any of these people, like say the people that heard the noises, maybe they're true believers or want to believe, whereas those that don't hear or see anything are more on the skeptical side?
When I did I'm about to finish my research project now. I actually tested over 100 people for my project, and a lot of people I spoke to about their paranormal experiences. There weren't that many that were actually active researchers that actually got EVP. I mean, I've got a couple of EVPs myself, but I'm quite sort of skeptical about what they are. But for the most part, most people tend to be in the middle in terms of paranormal belief. They're not necessarily high believers, but equally not strong skeptics. Although psychology students do tend to be a skeptical bunch. But in the general public, most people, about a third plus people, will believe in one kind of paranormal belief.
So I would guess people that would go on these ghost hunts are more open-minded. So
I would say so. When you get, I mean, what always amused me the very first ghost hunt I went to, the organizer would say, hands up if you're open-minded, hands up if you're a skeptic. And I thought that was quite difficult, because some people will use the term open-minded. It actually means they're a believer, whereas a skeptic wouldn't necessarily say they're open-minded because that has the connotation of being a believer. But it's almost like you're put into a camp before you even start. And it's on these ghost hunts, it can feel a little bit like if you can't necessarily out yourself as a skeptic, because people will say, rightly so, what you're doing here if you don't believe in ghosts.
Right.
And I will still get people asking me, why do I still go ghost hunting if I'm a skeptic? Yeah, I'm just fascinated in the paranormal.
Yeah, I get that. I get that as well. So sometimes, because I'm not a big believer in UFOs landing here.
Oh, okay.
But they say, but you watch all the shows and you're into it, but you don't believe it. But and also people, what I've found is even the most skeptical people or the most non-believers, you'll ask them about it and they say, no, I don't believe in ghosts, but there was this one time, or I know this one person. There's always a but, and there's always a story.
Well,
Everybody
completely.
has one.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a paranormal experience. It was probably about 10 years ago now. I was staying in a holiday cottage in the Lake District, and the very first night I woke up and had the sensation that somebody was standing over me in the darkness. I felt that it was a male presence, I don't know why. I ended up hiding under the covers because I was too scared to turn the light on, and then tried to get back to sleep. And it wasn't till the next morning that I looked at the visitor's book, and it made reference to there being a ghost in the property. So I was then convinced that it was haunted, and I'd, sensed a ghost in the house. And before I started my masters, I went back and stayed in the same place because obviously by that point I was a skeptic, and just to see if my experience was any different. And I didn't feel anything that time. So either the ghost left me alone, or because I was a skeptic, I then didn't feel anything, partly because maybe I didn't expect to sense something.
Or you blocked yourself off from that.
Well, exactly, yeah, that's another explanation. It could be that I've closed my mind to any sort of possibility of there being the paranormal.
Now, when you saw this apparition, you knew it was an apparition. You didn't think it's an intruder in my room.
No, I didn't see anything. It was just a sense of presence, which is actually one of the most common paranormal experiences. I've not seen anything, but I do suffer with sleep paralysis with hallucinations. So I quite often see things in my room at night, but I know it's a hallucination. But I've never actually seen anything whilst being fully awake.
Oh, I see. So
I mean, full apparitions are quite rare. They only account for about 2% of sightings. So it's unusual for people to see a full apparition, which is why my mum's ghost story is quite persuasive and very, it's very interesting because it's a full apparition and she saw it with another person as well. So
would you be willing to share that with us?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it is on my blog as well. It's in my mum's own words on my blog, but just to sort of give you a very brief rundown. She was, it was in Yorkshire. She was in her teens and she was staying with relatives, and she was out with a friend. I think they'd been to the cinema and they'd got some sort of fish and chips. So they wanted to go the long way home so they could get them eaten up before they got back. So they went down a country road, which the street lights sort of were about to finish. It was getting darker. So they were just about to think about turning around and heading back. My mum saw what looked like somebody on a bike floating behind a wall, and then she looked over, and then the person went through the wall across the road, and they weren't on a bike, they were just literally floating. Gliding along, and apparently it was a woman in Victorian dress. She had a parasol. She was almost see-through, so quite sort of opaque, a bit like a photograph, like a negative.
Yes.
And she floated across the road into a field and then disappeared. So a bit odd. And my mum asked a friend, did you see the same thing? What was that? And they sort of corresponded, and their descriptions matched. And when they got back to the house where they were staying, which was mum's relatives, they asked about, was there anything odd down that road? And apparently there used to be a manor house there with a daughter that lived there who used to sleepwalk. And one night the servant didn't lock the front door, and apparently this girl walked out the front door into the field and then drowned in the lake that was there. And that was at the point that they'd seen her disappear. So you can see, obviously, being told that story as a child, goosebumps. It was so engaging. I was just fascinated from that point on, and it's still one of the best ghost stories I've ever heard.
It is.
Brilliant.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That sounds like one of those hauntings that repeat themselves. That the soul's doomed to repeat themselves their death.
Exactly. Yeah. It's there was no interaction.
Right.
So, like you say, it was just a replaying of a historical event. Which, to be honest, if I was to see a ghost, I'd probably want that rather than one that was going to come, towards me and try and make a connection. Yeah, I mean, that's more your sort of traditional ghost story, I suppose.
You'd rather see one that doesn't interact with you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't want one that comes up and is in my face or anything like that. But a lot of the ghost stories you hear on, a lot of the ones that make the media now tend to be the more dramatic ones.
Yeah.
But that's not the most common, of course. Most of them are, quite sort of tame and, almost blink and you miss it.
Right.
And,
or you might not even know what you're seeing or even realize.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You could, you look over, you see someone, look away, and they've gone.
Right.
And there was no way they could have, left in that point. So, at the time you're thinking that's just another person.
Right.
And then it's almost after the event that you think, oh, that could have been paranormal.
When people see them, a lot of people will say they look just like you standing there, a solid person, and then they're gone. Yeah. So if you think about that, there's supposedly so many ghosts in the world. How many do you see throughout your day? Think
Well,
about it.
yeah,
You might
exactly.
see one standing in the crowd, and you don't even know that's
Yeah.
a ghost.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on a ghost hunt where the medium said you could be looking on on the street, and some of those people could be ghosts. So I don't know whether that's obviously.
Yeah, for a true believer, I guess that would
Yeah.
make sense in their mind. Well, yeah, that's true, because you think about it, there's so many gone to the other side that there's got to be something. But the funny thing is, I've always said you never see a ghost of Neanderthal, you never see a ghost of Julius Caesar, you never see a Viking ghost. Why
No,
is
they
that?
usually seems to be Victorian era.
Right.
I have heard people argue that you tend to see. Well, one is of course if you see someone in period dress, you're going to notice them, whereas if they're in modern dress, you're unlikely to notice them as much. But also, one of the arguments for seeing ghosts of a certain time period is because maybe had done something wrong in their lives, and they were scared that if they crossed over, they may go to hell or whatever, and that's why they're in limbo, because they don't want to cross over, whereas we tend to be a bit more non-religious in more recent times. So that's been given as one of the explanations as to why ghosts do seem to be from certain time periods.
That still doesn't explain why you don't see these other
Well,
other
there's
types of-
in I live. I'm Manchester, but in Chester, there's quite a few sightings of Roman ghosts. That's quite common because it's a Roman city. That's a bit further back in time, of course.
Yeah, and they said they could hear the Romans marching. They could hear the footsteps, the marching, or they can quickly see them going through their living room, a bunch of them or something.
Yeah, and usually walking underneath the floor, of course, because the floor level's risen since then. So they're walking the old paths as they were. I mean, the walls at Chester are meant to be haunted by Roman centurions, but they also have people dressing up as centurions as well. So you do have to be careful that you've not seen someone who's reenacting, history.
Well, that'd be interesting.
Always be skeptical.
Well, I don't know. My theory, my for what it's worth, I think maybe as time goes on, these ghosts start entering different dimensions, or just start fading away further and further, and that's why we don't see them.
Could be, yeah.
They're not there. It's just that we can't see them.
Well, the ghost that my mum saw was almost sort of semi-see-through. So, is that because it's a replaying of history, or is it because it's got so old now that it's almost degrading like a recording? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're passing into even another plane
further
of
away.
existence.
Yeah.
They're getting further and further away, different planes of existence. I don't. That's just my theory that I came up with one night. So.
It's a good theory.
It's as good as any other, I suppose.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So
none of us know, of course. So
yeah, that's true. I know I've seen one, maybe two.
Have you?
In my lifetime. The first one I wasn't really sure what I saw. We went to go visit my grandmother in a small town, and I kind of went wandering off and saw what looked like a group of nuns walking towards me.
Oh, really?
And as they got, and it was middle of the day, about 10 o'clock in the morning,
That's
I would
odd.
say. And they were walking right towards me, and I was like, who are these folks? And then I thought, well, they're nuns. As they got closer, I realized they were my size. I was a little kid. I was about 6 years old, 7 years old. And,
right.
And I thought, wow, what are these little short nuns? And they started mumbling something, and they had veils across their face. And they were saying something, but I couldn't understand it. And I got scared, and I took off. I ran back to my grandmother's house. And I ran into their kitchen. My grandmother and my mom were sitting in the kitchen. And I told them what I saw. And without batting an eye, my grandmother said, oh, those are the ghosts of the nuns. They're harmless.
Really?
Yeah.
Pretty scary, though.
Yeah, it scared me. So since then, I thought, oh, okay, I've seen something. And my mom even said, well, there you go. Now you've seen something. Growing up to them, it was nothing. It was nothing to them to see things.
As long as it wasn't the same as the nun in The Conjuring 2, because that would be quite scary.
I don't know if
you've not seen it yet.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But I've heard that it's kind of...
Just don't think back to that event when you watch the film, because there's a very scary demon nun in that.
Well, I don't know if I was more scared because I didn't know where I was, or I was scared because I thought I was in trouble. I think that's more, I thought I was in trouble and, with these, I don't know.
So you say you'd seen two, possibly?
Previous house I lived in, I always sensed there was something odd. And I lived there by myself for about 17 years. And then now and again, when I'd be watching TV in the living room, I can sense somebody was looking at me, like peeking around through the hallway.
Right.
But I'd look, and of course there's never anything there. And then just one night, just out of the blue, I looked really quickly, and I saw a little head peeking at me and popped back into the hallway.
Oh, scary.
And I thought somebody got in the house, so I ran around in there, and the only thing back in the hallway was my bedroom. And then, of course, I ran back there and there was no one there. I thought, well, I'm working long hours. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. Maybe just me. I don't know. So I forgot about it for a while. Then it happened again a few months later. And finally, I just said, hey, listen, if you want to watch TV with me, come out here and sit with me, or go back to the room and leave me alone, but quit spying on me or creeping me out.
Yeah. And did it stop after that?
And he stopped.
Oh,
It was
how
like a little
interesting.
head of a little blonde kid.
Oh, really?
And then subsequently, a few years later, I got married. My wife moved in, and one night I came home from work, and just out of the blue, she's just sitting in the living room. I walked in, she's watching television. I walked in, I said, "Hi, I'm home," and she says, "Hi, who's the little blonde kid that lives in the back room?"
Spooky.
Yeah, I never told her anything about it. Never.
Did you ever look into the history of the house at all?
Yeah, I did. There were no deaths in the house. The house was owned by a retired teacher, and then she moved on. She didn't die. She left. And that was it. But there's nothing that we could figure out as to why that entity was there.
Could have been from next door. You never know.
Nah, well, that's true. I didn't think of that. But we still moved away.
Well, made the right decision.
I think so. Yeah, I think. But that's the only two that I know of that I'm kind of sure what I saw.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean that's two more than most people. I mean, it is unusual to have a paranormal experience. Certainly, if you've seen something as well, because that is less common. I'm quite jealous, really, because I've yet to see anything, and I would love to see a ghost.
Well, I can say I had it. That's on the bucket list. I don't have to do it again.
Yeah, that's
I don't really
boxed
want
off.
I don't want to. Now, I haven't seen any UFOs or any of that sort of thing.
No.
So I don't know.
Well, I'm close to Manchester Airport, you see, so anything in the sky, I just put it down to that.
Where do you stand on that, Claire? Do you believe in?
No, I mean I don't believe in UFOs in the sense that it's intelligent life that's visited us. Obviously, from a scientific point of view, more likely than not, life out there. But whether there's been intelligent life that has also visited us, I don't think is very likely, just due to physics and the distance. I think highly unlikely. And then, of course, you have on top of that, you have things like conspiracy theories that they've already visited us and that the government knows about it and has covered it up. That to me is just highly unlikely. The number of assumptions you'd have to accept to believe any of that is just too great for me. So I find it interesting, and I will sort of read stuff about it, but I don't believe in that. I probably believe less in that than I do ghosts, probably.
And I tend to agree with you on that. There's never been any physical evidence that they've been here. Why would they come here?
We're boring.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if they'd been, we'd know by now.
I think so. And right now we'll leave there. We'll take a quick break. This is Dave Dominguez on the Event Horizon Show, and we're here with Claire Elliot, and we'll be back shortly.
You are listening to the Paranormal Chronicles Network. Please remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Visit theparanormalchronicles.com for paranormal news, reports, pictures, audio, and video content. Find us on Facebook at The Paranormal Chronicles. Together, we explore the unknown.
Do you believe in ghosts? A Most Haunted House is the true best-selling paranormal account that has chilled the world. Available on Kindle, on Audible, and in paperbook. Dare you read? Dare you step inside a most haunted house?
Good evening, creatures. It is I, Gavin. Now, if you're enjoying our show and would like to support us without chilling your bank account, then when you shop at line at Amazon, simply head to theparanormalchronicles.com website. Click support us on the left-hand side, follow the link to Amazon, and shop away. Your goods won't cost you any extra, but we get a few pence and a few cents as a commission. Think of it as a tip jar, and your support will help us chill, thrill, educate, and entertain for future broadcasts. Next time you shop Amazon, think theparanormalchronicles.com.
The Paranormal Chronicles.
Okay, and we're back on the Event Horizon Show. I'm Dave Dominguez, and we're here continuing our conversation with Claire Elliot of the Claire Witch Files. Claire, we were talking about UFOs, saying how we both don't believe in them.
Yeah, that's right.
There's life out there. And I think they're, just by the sheer numbers, there has to be intelligent life out there capable of space travel. But I don't know if they've been here because, number one, I understand that we're on the far edge of our own Milky Way galaxy. We're an obscure little speck of dust, really. So why would they come
find
here?
us first?
Yeah, exactly. They'd have to find us. And, when they come here, they say, well, maybe they want our water. Well, water is abundant in the universe. Maybe they want our gold or diamond or something like that. Well, there's a planet that's made out of a diamond. There's planets made out of, probably gold or they really don't need our resources here. And somebody who could travel those immense distances wouldn't need our resources anyway.
Well, exactly, yeah, because they'd have everything they need. Well, I always joke that, obviously we've sent out, I forget the name of it now, that mission that we sent out, that had all the artwork and the music on.
Right.
Maybe that's put them off. They thought, actually, no, we don't like the look of those. They're aliens, because we are. Don't like the look of those aliens. Don't like their music. Oh, it's boring. We're not going there. So that may have put them off.
Or they saw, these guys are bugs. They think it's an insect. I think maybe we're...
Yeah.
Or they saw that it was a record and they go, oh gosh, these people are still using records. Forget it. Well, I know they sent out 2, I believe. And one is headed out towards nothing, where there's absolutely nothing. So I don't know why they did that. The other one's headed towards inner universe, but it's going to be billions of years before it gets anywhere.
Well, exactly. And also, I mean, they're unlikely to look like us. They'd be completely different. Their technologies would be completely different. What we've sent out there, they may not even recognize how to play it, or they might not be able to pick up our signals that we're sending. So the chances of them finding us is very remote.
Or they might not even know what it is. They might even recognize it. To them, it's nothing. It's just as we wouldn't even bother trying to communicate with ants.
The popular theories, though, I mean, UFOs are popular as a paranormal phenomenon, and it's people. Obviously, a lot of people do believe in them.
Well, I tend to think that maybe they're not from outer space. Maybe they're from our future or something.
Could
some
be.
other parallel timeline or something like that.
Yeah,
I think that's more plausible to me in my little mind. You're more into the paranormal, not so much the UFO thing.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Have you ever had any encounters or heard the stories of the black-eyed children?
Yes, that one was quite popular about a year or two ago over here. A lot of those stories, obviously, I'm very sceptical of. But it's like anything. There might be, say, one report, and then it gets out there in the media. More and more people start to see something because there's an expectation that's formed that they're going to see black-eyed child. Right. Then you might get kids dressing up, putting black contact lenses in, scaring people. So these things tend to take off, a life of their own almost. I mean, you look at any kind of phenomena that happens. It starts off with a single sighting, and it can escalate. And we had quite a lot of werewolf sightings of all things recently, which I was quite pleased because I've not seen any of those for a while. I mean, black-eyed children was something that unheard of a good few years ago, and all of a sudden there's loads of different accounts of them. So they've either sprung from nothing, or these things take a life of their own, and people are going out there seeing something unusual, and then they are looking for the most common explanation that they can find in the media. So it might be black-eyed child rather than, say, a vampire or something like that. That's maybe, as an alternative explanation. That's the sort of the most like it's a paranormal explanation. I mean, it's like for you guys, obviously in America, you've got a lot of cryptids, probably more than we have here.
Yes.
So I mean, you'd never hear anyone say that they'd seen a Bigfoot. It's very unlikely that anyone would say they'd seen a Bigfoot over here. But obviously, if somebody sees something in certain, parts of your sort of countryside, as it were, that's often the explanation that comes out as the most common. I mean, we're quite boring, really. We've got the Loch Ness Monster, of course.
Right. You guys have the black cats.
Yes, we have, at Dartmoor and various other places we have black cats. Unfortunately, the pictures of those are usually quite disappointing. So you'll see a cat that might be a domestic cat, and there's no sort of sense of reference. So it's quite difficult to actually sort of see the scale of the black cat.
Right.
Yeah, we have that, but it's quite boring, really, compared to we haven't got anything as sexy as Bigfoot or.
Well, I've never heard Bigfoot be called sexy. That's the first time.
Yeah, it's a bit sexier than a biggish cat.
Right, more exciting.
Yeah. Well, I would say so. Yeah.
Well, the same thing with Bigfoot here. We don't have any definitive any pictures or anything like that. Pictures are always blurry. They're always dark.
Yes.
What I figure is, if you go to an amusement and they can take a picture of you coming down a roller coaster at 90 miles an hour and it's not blurry, why can't we get a picture of Bigfoot?
Well, exactly. Well, especially with the technology as it stands now. I mean, everybody has access to a camera. If they've got a mobile phone, they've got a camera. Yes. And the cameras on mobile phones are excellent now. You can take an amazing picture on that, almost similar to a digital SLR. And yet, we still don't have high-quality pictures of Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, for instance. There was another one that was going around on Twitter and various other places. And I think it's the blurriest one I've ever seen. It's very disappointing. It's just a black smudge.
Of the Loch Ness Monster?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of ghost photos are like that, of course. But the other thing is, the ghost apps that you get, the camera app that will put a ghost on a picture for you.
Oh, okay.
You see a lot of those flying around as genuine ghost photos, which is disappointing.
Yeah.
I do miss the old film photography when you had the sort of double exposures and long exposures. You used to get some amazing ghost photos with that. These days, they just don't cut the mustard.
No, well, you can't. It's a little harder to. Well, no, I don't know. It could be easier to fake. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but some of the old sort of the very famous ghost photos really are great. I mean, I wouldn't say they're real, but they're good photos, if you know what I mean.
Right.
These days, they either are very blurry or they've obviously been faked because someone's used a ghost app. Because you recognise the picture because you think, oh, I've got that app and I can select that type of ghost.
Going back to that, kind of killed it for me with the Loch Ness Monster was finding out that original surgeon's picture was a hoax.
Yes, I know that was a shame. But they've got no sense of scale for that photo again. So the picture itself is usually cropped, and even the full-size photo, I think, doesn't have any frame of reference. You've got no trees to look at, you've got no rocks to compare the size to. It could be any kind of scale. I mean, there are also other explanations at the time. Apparently there was a circus that was around there, and elephants would go in to the water to bathe. So that could account for some of the other sightings around the time. But it's like anything, that picture was obviously very, very famous. It's a tourist draw. People will go there to see if they can see the monster themselves, and then more pictures come out because as soon as you say to somebody, right, there's a monster in that lake, if you see anything that's odd, so any kind of unusual ripple in the water or anything dark, any kind of dark mass, you're going to think it's the Loch Ness Monster, and obviously then take a very blurry photo, then share it around online. So if it was just a normal lake, would you have thought something unusual was? You might have just put it down to an eel or an otter or something.
Yeah. Well, your mind is going to tell you, oh, that's the monster because that's what you expect to see. The history. Exactly. I had a friend once from Scotland, and he came all the way down here because he wanted to go to Roswell. I'm only about 4 hours away. So he came down here many years ago, and he said, we got here and we're driving. I go, what do you really want to go to Roswell for? There's nothing there. And he said, well, for the same reason you want to go to Loch Ness. There's nothing there either. And he grew up not a few miles away from there. So
did you end up going?
No, I never have. I've never been up there. It's on my bucket list. Go over there and buy the little trinkets and all that.
Yeah.
And, the guy that lives in that trailer selling trinkets.
Oh, there's a gift shop then.
Yeah. He offers a guarantee. He says that each one of his little scale carvings is identical to the monster, and he says if you can prove that it's not, he'll give you your money back.
I like it. Yeah, entrepreneurial. Very good.
So what do you think? You think there's anything in the lake?
No, I mean, it's interesting because I can't remember exactly. I think it is one of the deepest lakes, if not the deepest, actually. And I think there's certain points where it is very deep, and it's kind of mind-blowing how deep it is. So in your head, you kind of think, oh, it's that big. There could be something in there. Then the rational part of my brain says, it would be almost impossible for any kind of one or two monsters in that lake. It could physically fit, but how would they breed? They'd be babies. They wouldn't be able to sustain themselves if they had a natural lifespan. So you would need a certain number of animals to be able to sort of continue the bloodline, if you know what I mean. Right. I mean, that's one of the skeptical arguments against Bigfoot as well. If they are ape-like creatures, they would be social animals, so you'd have to have a certain size of group for them to carry on sustain the species, if you know what I mean. And if you had that many, you'd see them because there'd be a few out. There'd be quite a few out there. So you could say the same for the Loch Ness Monster. You'd have to have, I mean, I suppose 2 is the minimum, but they wouldn't last very long if you just had 2.
Exactly. But then you have the inbreeding thing going on and everything.
Exactly, yeah. It doesn't stack up when you actually sort of drill down. So, but I'd love to go and have a look. It's very, I mean, it's beautiful anyway, of course, without saying there's some sort of mythical monster. Right. It's beautiful area.
I've only seen it on television.
Yeah, I've not gone myself. I would love to go. I mean, obviously the Highlands are lovely as well. So, I like the Lake District as well. It's very picturesque, and every kind of natural area has some kind of myth or legend attached. I mean, I go to Wales quite a lot, and there are other sort of mythical beasts that are meant to be out there as well. And you'll occasionally hear sightings of things. So any kind of environment that's maybe not that well explored, or it's a big lake or a big area or a big forest, will have its own legend, and you will get people who've seen and heard things, because it's the unknown, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And then and people are always going to be their minds are going to wander off. They're going to let
exactly, yeah.
They're going to believe anything, and like you all have your castles, and they're all haunted, and
of course,
there's a castle there at Loch Ness, Urquhart Castle, is that called?
Well, there's loads of. Yeah. I mean, any I always joke that any kind of pub that you get will have a haunting. Any kind of old building, and like I say, particularly pubs, and it's a good tourist draw as well. stately homes and all that kind of stuff, because they've been there a long time. The way that they're set up is in keeping with historical traditions. So you're in a room that's the decor of 100, 200 years ago. So it's quite evocative. There'll be lots of stories about lost love and
and it's good for business.
So it's good, and it also keeps the history alive, of course, as well. It's a tourist draw. It keeps those buildings up and running, and it keeps the oral history alive. Those are the people who've lived there in the past.
Right.
And most ghost stories are quite tame, quite sort of traditional, and I just find them fascinating.
Yeah, that's true.
Really
that's
interesting.
True. It keeps up their tradition and their heritage and all that, and remember things. But what I've always thought was interesting, on those ghost hunting shows, they're always going to bed and breakfasts or inns or whatever that are struggling.
Yes.
So they got to get them on TV so they can get like free advertising for people to go there, and that's always seemed kind of dodgy to me.
Well, I suppose there's. Not everyone will let them in, of course. So you will get the people who maybe are struggling that will want to, let a TV crew in, because it's quite disruptive when you let TV crew in. But if you actually, there are various websites that you can look at where you can stay in a haunted hotel, and they must be a different cohort because they are really expensive. So whenever I've looked at staying in a haunted hotel, the prices seem to be more expensive than non-haunted hotels. So obviously it commands a premium.
Right. Well, there's a big market for that now.
Yeah,
People
seems to be. Yeah, I've still yet to do it. I will do at some point.
That's on your bucket list as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's the Golden Fleece in York is meant to be one of the most haunted pubs in Britain. It's one of the oldest. I mean, I've been to visit. They're great because they have a full-size skeleton sitting at the bar, which is quite.
He's still waiting for his drink.
Yeah, exactly, which is quite cool. So yeah, I'd love to stay there. I mean, obviously there's lots close to home as well, of course. But yeah, I'd love to do that. Hopefully I won't get too scared.
No, I don't think so. I think just have a drink or two, and then
you'll
be having all kinds of spirits.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, I am a skeptic, so I don't get scared necessarily. But that's not to say that the mind doesn't play tricks, and you might get a bit spooked sometimes.
Of course, but I think your curiosity would get the best of you. Do you want to?
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
Want to
definitely.
investigate further. You're primarily an investigator. You're a researcher.
Yeah, I mean, I do go on commercial ghost hunts, of course, but I'm also a member of paranormal investigation team locally as well. So we organise our own events for the public, but also if a family does think that they have something unusual in their house, we will go and have a look for them and sort of see if we can offer any help as well. So.
That was my next question. You go out and you help these families. They contact you, and you I guess you go and evaluate and see what.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it's good for them to have someone to talk to. There may be rational explanations for it. Even just talking about it, just talking it through with someone who's not a member of the family can be helpful. And sometimes that can then calm down because they feel better about things, or maybe they think that for certain things there might be a rational explanation.
Right.
But equally, some people don't necessarily want to do anything about it, if you know what I mean. They just want someone to have a look, and then I mean, we do also have a medium as part of the group as well, so he can offer insight into if he gets any sense of anything around and about, any sort of possible explanation or message that's coming through. I mean, they're usually quite sort of, they're not obviously like you see in the media where they're very dramatic. Those kind of instances are very, very rare. So
you don't see the camera or where people just say, hey, did you look at that, did you see that, and then everything goes crazy. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying those kind of events don't happen, of course. I'm sure they do. I watch a lot of ghost hunting programs and ghost story programs. If you actually end up looking at the original stories and the accounts of the people involved, they're usually a lot tamer than what you see on the programs and films. I mean, Conjuring 2 is a prime example. I mean, that obviously it's to do with the Enfield haunting, Enfield poltergeist. And I know a reasonable amount about the case, and there are sort of elements to it that are true to the accounts, but 90% of it was is a lot more dramatic than it actually was, and I'm reasonably comfortable with that. It's a horror film.
Right.
They want to get bums on seats. I don't mind it being made a bit more dramatic, but you when you're watching it, you do kind of have to just take a step back and think. Obviously, this is an entertainment program or a film, so I would encourage people to do their own research on these things, of course, as well, and actually maybe go back to the source material and read up on the cases themselves, because it's equally fascinating. It might as well be dramatic, but it's still fascinating because that is meant to be the true account.
The true account. They have to take some sort of artistic license to keep people entertained.
Exactly.
keep your attention. So
Exactly. Well, ghost hunting TV programs, if they were like a real ghost hunt, they'd be very boring. Because it's usually people just sat around for hours with hardly anything happening.
Exactly.
Getting cold and tired and bored.
Exactly. And it's, they shoot hundreds and hundreds of hours just so you can see an hour.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's edited down. If you actually go on a real ghost hunt, it's quite mundane, really.
Oh, well, I have yet to be on one. I get invited all the time, but I just I don't know.
Not keen.
I don't know.
I mean, it's fascinating to go and see, because obviously, if you go on a ghost hunt, you get to go to some amazing places, and you see them, overnight, which you wouldn't normally do if you went to visit normally. It's just a completely different atmosphere at night time. Even if you're not, a believer, it's still a different atmosphere. As long as you go to a nice stately home that has a roaring fire, and particularly if they offer you food as well, I would suggest going to one of those rather than some sort of horrible dark cave somewhere. I'd avoid those ones. Go to the nice stately home.
Exactly, the nice houses, the nice hotels and everything, and
stay
and
overnight.
we do have quite a few of those here too. We have a lot of haunted places here. And,
sure.
Maybe someday we'll go. I'll wait, till my kids get a little older, so we can all go and experience something like that. I've heard they're really quite fun. You're there with a bunch of like-minded people who are interested in the same thing, and you have your screaming and your whatever. And
well, who doesn't like listening to ghost stories? You're in a haunted location, you're dry and warm, and people are recounting really interesting ghost stories, and you've got the history, and your mind's sort of thinking, will I see something? And you've got that expectation, so it is good fun.
Yeah, it is, until you get home at night and you're
as long as something doesn't happen, then you're fine.
You start hearing bangs outside and things. So that's one of these days. We'll give that a try. And back to the families you help out. You've helped out quite a few, or just.
Well, no, I haven't myself. The group itself has. I mean, I only joined. I joined a year ago. So, and I've been doing a masters. I'm about to finish my masters. So I've not been able to go on everything because unfortunately I've been really busy with my master's thesis. Yeah, we've been to some haunted locations. I mean, commercial ones. Ordsall Hall in Salford near Manchester is one we went to recently, and that is a great location. That has a white lady that haunts it, and they're great because they've actually got a live webcam that goes on all day and all night, and you can log in online and you can look at the webcam. You can look at previous images, so it's great, for ghost hunters because they can, look through those pictures and see if they see anything spooky. And there have been some quite good ones on there actually. If you check out their website.
So they have them online. You can.
Yeah. So there's if anyone sees anything, they'll then keep those pictures. Of course, there is quite a famous one where it looks like there's a guy in a suit in the main hall, which is quite spooky actually. I think that people should check that out. It's quite interesting.
And what is that? What's that location, that website? Or?
It's Ordsall Hall. It's actually owned by the council there. So it's ORDSALL Hall, and that's in Salford. So if you just do a Google search for that, it should come up with their website, which I think might be a local council website. And if you look at the ghost cam, and there's lots of different rooms that you can look at as well. So it's quite good. And obviously then you see it during the day, and then at night as well. They've got night vision cameras as well, so it's quite interesting.
Oh, I bet it is. It's interesting to see. I like that kind of thing. I like to see the ghosts in the videos and see what comes of that. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today.
So, thank you for having me on the show.
And I do appreciate you being here, taking your time out on a Sunday. And how do people get in contact with you if they're more interested in your work?
Yeah, sure. Well, the website obviously is ClaireWitchFiles.com. I'm on Twitter at ClaireWitchFile. I'm also on Facebook as well, Claire Witch Files Facebook page, and I have my blog, which I try and fill in as well as all my other things I'm doing with my studies. That's ClaireWitchFilesblogspot.com, and I put on there my mum's ghost stories on there, of course, my own paranormal experience, and then any other sort of ghost hunting trips I do. There's a lot of psychology on there, of course, as well to do with my research, so check it out. But all the links are on my website, so that's probably the first place to go.
Good. We'll definitely be keeping up with you and seeing how you're going
on
your project, and it's a very, very interesting show, and thank you again very much. And folks, thanks again for listening. My name's Dave Dominguez. We were here talking with Claire Elliot of the Claire Witch Files. You all have a good day. Thanks again.
You have been listening to the Paranormal Chronicles Network. Do sleep well.